The Beef Market Update with Ann Dunford on RealAgriculture.com is brought to you by AFSC's Cattle Price Insurance Program, Haney Farms, and Gateway Livestock Exchange. Today's segment is Just Ask Ann, where we're going to take questions from the viewing audience. So we have 3 questions. Are you ready, Ann?
I am.
Okay, Ann, the first question is from Joe from Okotoks. He wants to know, for this year, are the highs on fat cattle in the US and Canada?
Okay, well, let's take a stab first of all at the U.S. market. We've already seen them trade this week in Texas, Kansas at 98, even a few trades here later this afternoon at 97. You go back last week, we were at $1 US. 2 weeks ago, we were at 102 US. So markets are already off $4 from that high at 2 weeks ago. And just with that placement pattern of those cattle on feed numbers as we head into the last part of the year in December, more cattle ahead, I'm going to go ahead and say, yeah, your highs are in for 2010 for the US. Here in Alberta and Western Canada, markets have also backed off today versus where they were last week. I think contrary to the US that topped 2 weeks ago, I'm going to go ahead and say that for the market here in Alberta, we topped last week. Now it was basically the same high as we saw in April. So if you're going to be a technical follower, we topped last week at basically the same money we saw the high in the first week of April. So there's your markets for here. In Western Canada, we're going to start to saunter a little lower. Of course, what the Canadian dollar does is still up for lots of debate, but we had quite a bit of news out of the way today, and the dollar's just flirting over par right now.
So I'll follow up to Joe's question. You mentioned the word saunter, so we're going to kind of just slowly drift lower, or how is that going to work?
Well, I think anybody would suggest that where we traded cattle at last week and where we traded cattle at this week, it's already been more than a saunter lower. I mean, markets make a high and then they head the other direction. So, we're going to be off $2 or $3 live, $4 or $5 just from the highs of last week. And yeah, that's more than a saunter, I guess. Okay,
the next question is from Peter from Picture Butte. And the basis has been fairly narrow as of late. Do you expect basis to go wider in the future, in the coming months?
Okay, good question. I think, first of all, that's for those that are wondering about what exactly is basis, spread between our price and the US price. And we've seen levels very narrow. Of course, we had very, very wide basis levels in our post-BSE years. And so now, starting to see a little bit more of a return to this type of seasonality. Basis is very seasonal. That we used to see before 2003. And then secondly, some of the numbers we've seen here very recently are very strong, very narrow numbers compared to historic levels. So what's going on? Well, of course, we've talked about supplies being smaller, packing plants here in this country running at higher kill levels than they have been. So demand domestically has been higher for fed cattle than they were over the last couple of years. And I think you could possibly make an argument that the Canadian packer is doing a better job selling it on a retail here in Canada. So if he can sell it better, he's going to keep the basis narrow.
Okay, the third question is from Bill from Swift Current. And I have a cow-calf operation. I watched the video last week and I saw that you talked that Montana calves could possibly come north. Has this happened yet?
Okay, well, again, another good question. And we don't have actual numbers out yet, but we have had confirmation, of course, that some cattle have crossed in the last week and again this week. So these would be feeder cattle coming out of Montana into Alberta for the most part so far. And again, not a good idea on exactly what for numbers. At the same time, we're also hearing that when you do the math on the deal, once you're looking at the market in the US and what's the costs are to import, and by the time they land here with the freight, there's not as big a difference and big a spread as what we're thinking that there was maybe a few weeks ago. So there are some cattle moving, but based on that price information, Sean, I wouldn't suggest there's going to be a lot more.
And I'll follow up to Bill's question. It sort of looks, or there is a potential where this is more a hoopla than actual what's actually happening.
Well, and what happens when a few new buyers show up at a market, prices go up. That's how the world works. So as prices have moved higher, of course, that puts Canadian and U.S. prices more in line. And you're going to see that we talk about arbitrage between U.S. and Canadian prices all the time, and that's classic. That's exactly what's happened.
Okay, Ann, thanks a lot for answering the viewers' questions. We'll talk to you again next week.
Perfect. Thanks, Sean.